Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today we are going to talk about Code Vein once again. So originally this video was supposed to be about the enemies, but during the past few weeks I took time to look at Code Vein again and noticed some new aspects that could be potential issues for this game. So I thought it would be better to cover the major issues that exist in Code Vein, and I'm afraid that some of them won't change even with the delay. Also, this will be my last Code Vein video until a major reveal, which could be during Tokyo Game Show in September. So the first issue is the level up system or the experience system of Code Vein. So from what I've seen so far, the level up system is not the same as Dark Souls. The only stat that level up are the health, stamina and max ichor of the character. So at first I thought it was made that way just for the demos, like some sort of placeholder. But after reading some articles and rewatching various footage from the E3 build, I realized that the level up system was going to be as linear as what we saw in the demos. What mainly gave it away is this article where they explain that by increasing the player character's level, the basic stat will increase. And giving a look at the level up screen, we can see the name of the blood code currently equipped. So they don't mention that you get to level each stat individually. Basically, this game will have a system similar to something like Final Fantasy XIV, where you can have multiple classes on the same character, but you level them up individually, and they already have their own stats already set. Now, I don't think this is a problem, however, it has some implications for this game since it's a Souls-like game. First of all, the level cap will most likely be around level 60 to 100, because if the leveling is linear, there is no point of having a higher level cap anyways. It could also mean that New Game Plus might not be part of this game, since I've never confirmed it. I can only assume that it will just not be there. There can also be an issue with weapons and gift stat requirements, which can obstruct builds and the creativity of the players. Unless Code Vein offers enough classes and weapons to get around the linear level up, we will definitely see some complaints about the stat requirement. And this leads me to something that was revealed in the DLCs of the game. So in the DLCs, they were offering an alternate costume for Mia, 3 God Eater weapons and a blood code. Mia costumes indicates that we can have some skins for our AI partner, which is a very good thing. The God Eater weapons are okay since they are just there for pure fan service, but it also tells me that they can add more important weapons through DLC. Now the blood code is a major problem since it's a class, and classes in this game have stats that are already set. They also come along with unique gifts, so basically this can be a sign of important content being added through DLC, and that can be somewhat pay to win. Imagine if a class had most of its stats at A+, and it's locked behind this paywall, and it means that that class would be the one offering more freedom to the players in terms of playstyle, like you would equip any weapon you like or probably any gifts that you would like. And it would also be one of the strongest class of the game since the stats would generally be very high. So overall, I'm afraid that the game originally didn't have enough content to offer, and they were probably planning on adding that type of content through DLC packs and not even through expansions. Then again, having this linear level up system is fine, but there are ways to get around it and even add content for New Game Plus eventually. Hopefully they can find that. So the next major issue is the optimization. Isn't it strange that we've never seen a single footage of Code Vein at a clean 60 FPS? Apparently the game has always been locked at 30 FPS for the demos, and for the E3 build apparently they tried to let it run at 60 FPS, but there were actually a few complaints reporting recurring frame drops, especially when there were more than 2 enemies at the same time. In an interview, the developers confirmed that Code Vein was going to feature an open world map. Hopefully it has nothing to do with the optimization, and hopefully it will still be the case after the delay. Moving on to the animation, which is still a serious problem of this game. There's a lot that I can say, but I prefer keeping it short and simple. So I think it's important to ask, what are the key animations in Code Vein that they could potentially use for an anime? In character, there are tons of movements in the game that can be found in the anime. The way the characters dance, run or attack, most of it belongs to the game, and actually they featured new devouring styles in the anime before Goider Resurrection was out, so you can say there's some sort of realism between the Goider games and the anime. Now in Code Vein, the animations are somewhat awkward and it's really hard to appreciate them. Actually, someone in my comments said that it was hard to tell if the characters were actually breathing in their idle animation. This also affects the enemy. Like I said before, they walk normally, they stand normally, which is all very strange for enemies that are supposed to be like zombies. On top of that, bosses also have lack of animation. The invading executioner, for example, is not actually dancing, even though she was based around the concept of an exotic dancer, or simply just moving around like the dancer of the Boreal Valley in Dark Souls 3 would also be nice. The Queen's Knight is apparently supposed to change his stance during the fight, but you don't get to see the stance change after phase 2. And speaking of the boss fight, it seems like all of them will share the same second phase theme, which is just the dumbest thing ever in my opinion, because it means that we will never get to appreciate the soundtrack of the game, and we will have to listen to the same theme song over and over again for every boss fights. But anyways, enemies need to have some sort of body language instead of moving in that very robotic way, and the player character needs to have more iconic and memorable animations. Now the next issue is the sense of action. There are still tons and tons of people saying that the action in Code Vein is somewhat boring. Now some people make it sound like Code Vein should be a Souls-like game, which I cannot agree with, of course, but I can understand that after the second build, the game still looks a little bit rigid and unsatisfying, I would say. Now when I look at Code Vein, the combat looks very static, of course, because both player character and the enemy's attacks don't reach for the targets. The hitbox don't make the character travel much of a distance. In Dark Souls 3, your character will travel a certain distance when they attack depending on their weapon. It's actually very interesting that the spears make you travel a very short distance to keep you away from the fight as much as possible. And something that I've seen a few times in Code Vein was people thinking they were at the optimal range to hit an enemy, but they missed their attacks because the character doesn't go as far as they would like. There's also no pushback effect when the enemies get hit, which contributes to the static combat. Aside of that, enemies' recovery frames are a bit too long in my opinion. I understand that they need to have slow telegraphed attacks, but I think they should recover from them a little bit faster. By the way, I'm talking about the common enemies of Code Vein. I'm saying that because the developer seems to value tough enemies more than common enemies, which is not a good thing. Common enemies help the player learn the game, so what we can see as a result in the demos is people getting absolutely destroyed by tough enemies because they didn't learn anything from the common enemies, which are a much lower level. Finally, the last issue is definitely the level design. I'm not really talking about the environment here, but then again, it could look a little bit more realistic, with more dust effects, more lights and shadows and all that stuff, like I did say actually in one of my previous videos. But anyways, when it comes to level design, it's more about the structure of the dungeons. In Code Vein, most dungeons we've seen so far in gameplay footage or screenshots seems to be extremely narrow, linear, and they all lack of verticality. At this point, I've pretty much given up on the narrow aspect. In fact, I think there are interesting ways to use it and make the game more challenging. For example, imagine if on a narrow path you had to deal with 2 shielded enemies. If they place enemies better within the dungeon, it can actually make a lot of things better for this game. Now, before I say anything about the verticality, I just wanted to point out that fall damage doesn't exist in Code Vein. Personally, I don't mind that at all, but I just wanted to know what you guys think about it. Anyways, for the verticality, ladders exist, but man, they are problematic. They just don't fit with the architecture of the environment, and people also call them Bloodborne ripoff. Their climbing animation is really slow and looks terrible, so I'm just gonna say it again. I think they should be removed from the game in general. And I think they should get replaced by an indicator on the ground telling the player to maybe hold X, and as they do, it fills up a gauge and their character prepares a high jump, and once it's done, they will get launched in the air from point A to point B. It'll be so much faster and cooler in my opinion than these ladders. Also, for elevators, I said they could use special missiles that would turn the player into particles and fly from point A to point B. Of course, both missiles need to be activated on each point. But then again, maybe they don't want much verticality and scripted mobility in their game, so yeah. So this is pretty much all of the major issues that Code Vein has in my opinion, and there are still changes that I wanted to talk about, but to summarize it all, it's about the gifts. Making a few common enemies use some gifts like Foul Blood Barrier or Adrenaline, and actually make them drop them would be super interesting in my opinion. Also use an upgrade system for the gifts by using duplicates and some rare items maybe. And as you keep upgrading your gifts, they will start requiring more and more stats. That way, most classes will have access to more gifts, but they would use them at different levels. And such system could also justify New Game Plus. Also, imagine if Thorns of Judgment could work as traps and attack the players from the ground or the walls, or actually, if they don't have a particular function in the dungeons, they could also tell something about the enemies by their colors, for example, their elemental weakness. Finally, they could also make some classic monster designed around the blood veils, for example, werewolf from the hound type blood veil, or maybe a succubus with the ivy type. Or also make enemies have access to special moves with the focus system. So yeah, I think I've pretty much said everything I had on my mind. Like I said, this is my last video of this game until a major reveal. Hopefully Code Vein will show up at the Tokyo Game Show. Maybe hit us with that demo reveal, but nah, I don't think so. And by the way, I could be streaming Monster Hunter World soon. I don't know if I want to buy it. I pretty much need an excuse to do so let me know if you would be interested in watching it. Maybe have a little talk during the stream and have some backseat gaming going on, because I don't know much about that game anyway. So if it's not the case, it's still okay, because I don't really want to spend my money on games that much. So yeah, so thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you. I actually don't know when it will happen, so yeah.